The curtain fell to thunderous applause, and I found myself on my feet, clapping until my palms stung. There's something magical about live theater, the way it suspends reality and transports you to another world entirely. I'd been saving for months to afford these tickets, and the production of The Inheritance had exceeded every expectation. As the curtain rose again for the cast to take their bows, I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. Marcus Elliott, the lead actor whose performance had left me breathless. I wasn't alone in my admiration. The entire audience seemed captivated by his presence, his ability to command attention without saying a word. The theater was packed that night, one of those historic venues in the West End with ornate ceilings and plush red seats that creaked slightly when you leaned forward. The air felt electric, charged with the collective emotion of 300 people who had just witnessed something extraordinary. I'd always loved the theater, had done some amateur productions myself in university, but tonight reminded me why I'd fallen in love with it in the first place. There's an intimacy to live performance that no film or television show can replicate. The knowledge that you're breathing the same air as these artists, that what you're witnessing is ephemeral and will never be repeated in exactly the same way again. As the cast lined up across the stage, the applause swelled. Marcus stepped forward for his solo bow, and the theater erupted. Something shifted in his expression as the sound washed over him. A subtle change that probably wasn't visible beyond the first few rows, but from my seat in the third row, I caught it. His eyes closed briefly, his chest expanded with a deep breath, and when he looked out at the audience again, there was something almost hungry in his gaze. It was fleeting, replaced quickly by the gracious smile of a professional accepting praise, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen. The cast took their final group bow and began to exit the stage. That should have been it, the end of a wonderful evening. I would gather my program and jacket, file out with the rest of the audience, perhaps stop for a drink somewhere to process the performance, and then head home. That was the plan, at least. But as the actors began to disperse, Marcus paused at the edge of the stage. His eyes scanned the front rows, and then, impossibly, locked with mine. I felt a jolt of recognition, though we'd never met. He held my gaze for 1 second, 2, then gave a slight nod toward the side of the stage before disappearing behind the curtain. I remained frozen in my seat as the audience began to disperse. Had that really happened? Had one of London's most celebrated young actors just, invited me backstage? It seemed absurd, the kind of fantasy that theater-obsessed fans might concoct. I was about to dismiss it entirely when an usher approached me. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you waiting for someone?" I looked around, realizing I was now one of only a handful of people still seated. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I thought." The lead actor seemed to. She smiled knowingly. "Mr. Elliott asked me to escort anyone still seated in row 3, seat 24 backstage, if they were interested." "That's you, isn't it?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, that's me. I'm James," I added, though she hadn't asked. "Follow me, then, James," she said, leading me toward a discreet door at the side of the auditorium. The transition from the public space of the theater to the backstage area was jarring. One moment, I was in the hushed, carpeted elegance of the auditorium, and the next, I was in a warren of narrow corridors buzzing with post-performance energy. Crew members wheeled costume racks past us, technicians dismantled equipment, and actors in various stages of costume and makeup hurried between dressing rooms. The usher navigated this controlled chaos with practiced ease, occasionally greeting colleagues as we passed. "First time backstage?" she asked, noticing my wide-eyed expression. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed nervously. "Everyone looks like that their first time. It's a different world back here." She led me to a door with a handwritten sign that read, "Marcus Elliott," and knocked briskly. "Your guest is here," she called, then gave me an encouraging smile before disappearing back into the backstage bustle. The door opened, and there he was, Marcus Elliott, still in his stage makeup but changed into jeans and a simple black t-shirt that clung to his frame. He was shorter than he appeared on stage, but no less magnetic. His dark hair was damp at the temples, and up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes that the stage lights had concealed. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I wasn't sure you would. Come in, please." I stepped into the dressing room, acutely aware of how surreal this moment was. The small space was cluttered with flowers, cards, and the detritus of quick costume changes. A makeup station with a large mirror dominated one wall, surrounded by bulbs that cast a warm glow over everything. "I'm Marcus," he said, extending his hand. "James," I replied, hoping my palm wasn't sweaty as I shook his hand. Your performance was incredible." He smiled, a different smile than the one he'd given the audience, smaller, more genuine somehow. "Thank you. It's always different when someone says that up close rather than shouting it across a crowded stage door." "Do you normally invite strangers backstage?" I asked, immediately regretting how blunt it sounded. But Marcus laughed. "Not normally, no? But you weren't watching the play like most people do." "What do you mean?" "Most people watch a play to be entertained, or moved, or to tick off a cultural experience. You were watching like someone who understands what we're actually doing up there, the craft of it." He gestured to a small sofa against the wall. "Please sit. Would you like something to drink? I have water, or there's probably some champagne floating around somewhere. Opening night tradition." "Water is fine," I said, perching on the edge of the sofa. "And you could tell all that just from how I was watching?" Marcus filled 2 glasses from a bottle of water on his dressing table and handed one to me. "I've been doing this long enough to recognize the difference. You're involved in theater yourself, aren't you?" "I was, in university. Nothing professional. Just student productions, community theater, that sort of thing." "But you love it," he said. It wasn't a question. "I do. I always have." He sat beside me, not too close, but close enough that I caught the scent of his cologne mingling with the remnants of stage makeup and sweat. "Did you hear the applause tonight?" he asked, his voice dropping slightly. "Of course. It was deafening." "No, I mean really hear it. The texture of it. The way it builds and recedes, like a tide. The moments when it's about to crest, and then someone starts clapping harder and it surges again." His eyes had taken on that same intensity I'd glimpsed during the curtain call. "There's nothing else like it in the world." I watched him, fascinated by this glimpse into how someone at his level experienced performance. "I've never thought about it that way. Most people don't." He took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving mine. "Can I tell you something that I don't tell many people?" I nodded, unable to look away. "Applause turns me on," he said simply. "Not in a crude way. It's the most honest feedback an actor can get. Immediate, visceral, unfiltered. When an audience applauds, they're saying, 'You moved me. You made me feel something so strongly that I need to express it physically.' That connection, it's intoxicating." I felt a flush creep up my neck, not just from his words but from the way he was looking at me as he said them. Direct, unapologetic. "I can understand that," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "It's validation, isn't it? Proof that what you're doing matters." "Exactly," he said, leaning forward slightly. "But it's more than validation. It's energy. Exchange. When I'm on stage and I feel the audience with me, really with me, it's like nothing else exists. And when that builds to applause." He trailed off, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Let's just say I've had to wait in the wings after particularly enthusiastic curtain calls." The implication hung in the air between us. I took a sip of water, buying myself time to process this conversation. I'd come backstage expecting perhaps an autograph, a brief chat about the production. Instead, one of the most acclaimed actors of his generation was confiding in me about the erotic charge he got from performing. "Is that why you invited me back here?" I asked finally. "Because you saw that I understand theater?" "Partly," he admitted. "But also because I saw how you were watching me, specifically. Not the character, me. There's a difference, and I noticed." I felt exposed, as though he'd read thoughts I'd barely acknowledged to myself. Yes, I'd been captivated by his performance, but there was more to it than artistic appreciation. There had been moments when I'd forgotten to breathe, when my eyes had traced the line of his jaw, the movement of his hands, the way his body occupied space with such confidence. "I'm not usually this forward," he continued when I didn't respond. "But there's something about post-show nights. The adrenaline, the come-down from performance. It makes everything feel more immediate, more honest." He set his glass down. "Tell me if I'm misreading this, and I'll apologize, and we can talk about the play instead." "You're not misreading anything," I said quietly, surprising myself with my boldness. This feels unreal. People like me don't usually get pulled backstage by people like you." He laughed, a genuine sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "People like me? What actors? Successful, talented, Gorgeous actors, yes. Gorgeous, His smile widened. You know, the stage door is probably clearing out by now. Would you like to get out of here? The cast usually heads to a bar around the corner after shows. Nothing fancy, just somewhere we can decompress. You could meet some of the others, if you'd like. I hesitated, reality intruding on this strange, magical encounter. Won't they think it's odd that you've brought a random audience member? Trust me, they've seen odder things. Besides, Eliza, she plays my sister, is always saying I need to socialize more with people outside the industry. He stood, gathering his jacket from a hook on the wall. No pressure, though. If you'd rather keep this moment as is, I understand. I knew the sensible choice would be to thank him for the conversation, ask for that autograph after all, and leave with a good story to tell my friends. But as I looked at him, this man who had just shared something so personal, who had seen something in me worth noticing, sensible was the last thing I wanted to be. I'd love to join you, I said, standing as well. His smile was worth any awkwardness that might await me. Excellent. Let me just finish getting this makeup off, and we'll go. I watched as he sat at the dressing table and efficiently removed the remaining stage makeup with practiced motions. In the mirror, his eyes met mine. Tell me more about your theater experience, he said. What roles have you played? And just like that, the tension broke into easy conversation. I told him about playing Mercutio in a university production of Romeo and Juliet, about the community theater production of Angels in America that had changed how I thought about performance. He listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. By the time he was ready to leave, it felt as though we'd known each other for much longer than half an hour. The bar was a short walk from the theater, a nondescript pub with a private room in the back that the management kept reserved for the cast on performance nights. Marcus greeted the bartender by name and led me through to the back room, where about a dozen people were already gathered, drinks in hand, the volume of their conversation suggesting this wasn't their first round. Everyone, this is James, Marcus announced as we entered. He's joining us tonight. James, this is, well, everyone. There were smiles, waves, a few curious glances, but no one seemed particularly surprised by my presence. A woman with cropped silver hair, Eliza, I realized, though she looked dramatically different without her character's wig and costume, patted the seat beside her. Come sit, she said warmly. I need someone new to talk to. If I have to hear Derek's story about meeting Helen Mirren one more time, I might scream. I met her twice, actually, called a man from across the table, presumably Derek, to general groans and wadded-up napkins thrown in his direction. Marcus went to get us drinks, and I found myself easily absorbed into the group's conversation. They were curious about what I'd thought of the play, eager to hear an audience perspective that wasn't filtered through the formal language of reviews. I was struck by how normal they all seemed, talented, certainly, and with the easy confidence of people accustomed to being watched, but also just people unwinding after work, complaining about technical difficulties and sharing industry gossip. When Marcus returned with our drinks, a gin and tonic for him, a beer for me, he settled into the space beside me, his thigh pressing lightly against mine in the crowded booth. Surviving so far? He asked quietly. More than surviving, I replied. Your cast is lovely. They are, he agreed, his eyes warm, though I'm finding it hard to focus on them at the moment. The directness of his gaze sent heat coursing through me. I took a sip of my beer to hide my reaction, but from his knowing smile, I hadn't been entirely successful. The evening progressed in a pleasant blur of conversation, laughter, and the gradual, intoxicating awareness of Marcus beside me. As cast members began to drift away, some to homes and families, others to continue the night elsewhere, the space between us seemed to charge with possibility. By the time only a handful of people remained, Marcus's hand had found its way to my knee beneath the table, a casual touch that felt anything but. I should probably head home, I said reluctantly, aware of the last train time approaching. I've got work tomorrow. Of course, Marcus said. Let me walk you out. We said our goodbyes to the remaining cast members, several of whom exchanged knowing looks that I pretended not to notice. Outside, the night air was cool after the warmth of the pub, the street quiet except for the distant sounds of late-night London. Which way are you headed? Marcus asked. Tube station, I said, gesturing vaguely. Northern Line. I'll walk with you, he offered. I'm not far from there myself. We walked in companionable silence for a moment, the space between us charged with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I'm glad you stayed after the show tonight." "So am I said honestly. "It's been unexpected." He laughed softly. "That's one word for it." He paused at a street corner, turning to face me. "James, I'd like to see you again. Properly. Not just after a show when I'm still half in character and riding an applause high." My heart skipped. "I'd like that too." "Good." His smile was slow, satisfied. "I have shows every night this week, but maybe dinner on Sunday? It's our day off." "Sunday works for me," I said, trying to sound casual despite the giddy disbelief bubbling up inside me. We reached the tube station all too quickly. Marcus stopped at the entrance, just out of the pool of light cast by the station sign. "This is where I leave you then," he said. "Unless." The invitation in his voice was unmistakable. For a moment, I was tempted, so tempted, to accept whatever he was offering. But something held me back. "I think," I said carefully, "that I'd like to save that for when you're not still buzzing from tonight's applause. When it's just about us, not the performance." Instead of disappointment, respect, and something like admiration flickered across his face. "I like that answer," he said. "Sunday then." "Sunday," I agreed. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. His lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle but deliberate, a promise rather than a demand. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark. "For the record," he murmured, "that had nothing to do with applause." I smiled, feeling braver than I had in years. "Glad to hear it." He waited until I'd gone through the barrier before turning to leave, raising a hand in farewell. As I stood on the platform waiting for my train, I replayed the evening in my mind, still half convinced I'd imagined it all. But the lingering warmth of his kiss was real, as was the message that appeared on my phone moments later. "In case you were wondering if you dreamed tonight, you didn't. Looking forward to Sunday. M." I smiled at my phone, drawing curious glances from other late-night commuters. Whatever happened next, whether Sunday led to something lasting or became simply an extraordinary memory, tonight had changed something in me. I'd stepped backstage, literally and figuratively, and found a world more complex and fascinating than I'd imagined. And I'd found someone who saw me, really saw me, across a crowded theater. As the train arrived, I thought about applause, about the connection between performer and audience, the exchange of energy that Marcus had described. Perhaps that's what had drawn us together, a recognition of how powerful that exchange could be, how transformative. Or perhaps it was simpler than that, two people connecting in a world where genuine connection often feels impossible. Either way, I couldn't wait for Sunday, for the chance to discover who Marcus was without the stage lights and the applause, and who I might be with him. The train doors closed, and I was carried away from the theater, from Marcus, but towards something new, something unexpected, something that, like the best theatrical experiences, had the potential to change everything. Total _char_count, 18,874.